Hi everyone, thank you for introducing me. I am just going to fix my screen to make sure we see my PowerPoint. You should be able to see that. Great.
We can see.
Working well? Yep. Okay. All right. So like it was introduced, my name is Vanessa. I am a researcher in psychology here at the University of Reading. And in my work, I study specifically student motivation and well-being at school. Within that domain, I'm specifically interested in understanding how the people around students, like their teachers or their parents, can support and positively influence student motivation, engagement, and well-being. I mostly do research in primary schools, but the principles that I study and the theory that I study are also applicable in secondary school, in university, and even in the workplace. So my hope today is that you'll be able to apply what you learn in this talk to better either understand your own motivation and support your own motivation, or support the motivation and well-being of others. Yeah, and thank you for being here today also. All right. So why study motivation? Well, motivation is everywhere. I find it a fascinating topic. Every action or non-action, everything you decide to do or not to do, has some sort of motivation behind it. Motivation is the why you do things or why you don't do certain things. Anything goes from whether you approach someone, whether you contact a friend, whether you decide to go for a run, do some physical activity or not, what you choose to eat every day, and engaging in your work or your studies. It's also any activity that could be spiritual practice or hobbies. So there are different reasons behind all of these choices and actions that you do every day. And you can have different types of reasons to do an activity. So I want us to start with a quick exercise to see what different types of reasons we can have. And I'm going to focus, of course, on motivation at school because that's what I study. Can you give me yourself some reasons of why you study and why you do your schoolwork? I'd be interested to see in the chat if you can name a few of the reasons why you study and do your schoolwork. And I'll read your answers out loud. What I want to see from that is the range of reasons, the possibilities of the reasons that could be behind why some people study. And as well, it's possible that you have more than one reason for studying. If anybody wants to go in the chat, I am eager to read your answers. I'll wait a few seconds just to make sure. In the meantime, if I were to think about the reasons why I study, I could think of a few reasons. Or maybe Chris, you have a few reasons you want to.
So I'll just unmute myself, but I can see that we've had the first one come in. Thank you very much to Eleanor. So to understand the materials to do well in my exams, I was also going to say something very much along the same lines, and also someone else has also said studying for the love of it as well. So you love the subject so much that gives you the incentives to study and know more.
Yeah, we can see different reasons. Is it, wait, you see some of them coming up, or?
Yes, so one of them has come up, and somebody also wrote me a message as well.
Oh, okay, I don't see them. That's why. Yeah, so we can have different reasons for doing the same activity, and we can have more than one reason at once. And because there are different reasons why and different types of motivation, researchers have tried to come up with a model to classify those reasons into categories. Were there any other responses, or can I move on to the next slide?
That is it for now, but guys, please do get your answers in, and also feel free to ask any questions, and then we will put them to Vanessa.
Thank you. Yeah. So researchers have come up with a model to classify those reasons into different categories. Here's the model. So as you can see, I hope you can see my mouse. They have classified the reasons into three broad categories. There's amotivation, where there isn't really motivation, either no motivation at all or a lack of intention. There's an extrinsic motivation category. This is where the motivation comes from outside the activity. Like saying, I do it because I want to have a good job. I study because I want to have a good grade, or I want to have a good salary later on. Within the extrinsic motivation category, there are other subcategories that we will go into later. And then there's the intrinsic motivation. That means that it's more internal. The motivation comes from within the activity. If you say, for example, that the other reasons, I study because I like it, because it's fun, then the activity is in itself motivating. All of these type of motivation go from more external, like we were saying, either it's outside of the activity, or to more internal. But they also go from less self-determined, meaning that you determine whether you like it or not, or whatever motivates you. If it's less self-determined, for example, somebody else is giving you a reward for it. If you go get a job, it's outside of the activity, you don't really decide on it. It goes from less self-determined to more self-determined, where intrinsic motivation is where you find it fun. So you decide for yourself to go into, you're motivated by your own internal motivation. Like I was saying, they classified those types of motivation, and they arrived with different subtypes for those categories. So like I was saying, motivation is no action or no intention. So a student at school would say, I don't know why I study. So you can imagine that if you don't know why you study, it's a bit harder to get yourself to do things and engage. Now within the extrinsic motivation category, you can decide to study to get rewards or avoid punishment. That would be saying, oh, I study to get a good grade, or I study to avoid a bad grade. Some say even I study because I want to get money, because my parents would give me money if I get A's, anything like that, that is external. If we move further along the ladder towards more internal, some people could say that they do what they do because they want to feel pride, or avoid shame, or avoid feeling guilty. This way would be this would be represented by a student saying that they study because they would feel like a bad person if they didn't. So you see, it's a bit more internal, but it's still external to the activity. They don't do it because they feel that the activity itself of studying is motivating. If we go a bit further again along the ladder, some students could say that they value, or that studying goes along with their values, that goes along with the personal meaning that they give to either the activity or their lives. That would be, for example, a student saying that they study geography because it's important for them to know the world they live in. So it gets a bit more internal. It has more meaning for the student. And the last subcategory within the extrinsic motivation category would be when you find importance for yourself, your life goals, or your identity. It becomes kind of central to who you are. So that would be, I study because learning is an important part of who I am. Again, we're really getting close to the most internal motivation that there could be. And the last one is intrinsic motivation. Like I was saying before, intrinsic, so the activity itself is interesting. So it's satisfying, it's fun, you're curious about it, you have a lot of interest. It's a type of motivation that we often refer to as whenever you're having fun, or like looking at children play. When they play, nobody's telling them what to do. Nobody's telling them you have to play or you need to be motivated to play. They just are because the activity itself is fun. So you can try to see and place yourself on this figure to see where your motivation type would be. If it's closer towards the internal side or the more external side, there is probably a lot of you have mixed motivation, different types together. The thing to note is that research shows that the more people are towards this end of the scale or the ladder, The more these people lean toward intrinsic motivation, the more they engage in the activity, the better they feel while they're doing it, and the more they can sustain that motivation and that engagement and persevere when they face difficulties. It's more difficult for people to sustain their motivation and their engagement when they're towards this end of the continuum. But all types of motivations can have their purpose. So we saw the different types of motivation, but what can predict the types of motivation that we have? And is there a way to change the type of motivation so that it can be more self-determined or more internal than other types? Or is there a way to help students who are not motivated, have a motivation or purely external motivation, and they won't do anything, they won't feel interested by anything unless there's a reward? Well, according to the theory that I studied, the self-determination theory, which is a motivational theory, all humans, everyone in the world has 3 basic psychological needs that need to be satisfied for us to be motivated, engaged in our environment, and to feel good. And according to this theory, the level of each type of motivation is influenced by how much of our basic needs are satisfied. So when they're satisfied at school or at home, then our needs makes us feel good and more engaged, and there's a greater possibility for us to be internally or intrinsically motivated. The first need that they identified was the need to be autonomous. So autonomy is when we feel that our behaviors are based on our values, on our own goal, that we decide what we want to do. We have choice and we can make decisions and direct our own behaviors based on our interests. The second goal they identified was competence. You need to feel competent. So that means you need to be able to have an effect on your environment or to know how to attain a goal or avoid an outcome that you don't want to attain. It's knowing what to do. And the last need that I identified was relatedness. You need to feel connected to other people that you find important for you and to feel that you can contribute to their lives as well. So you need to feel a sense of belongingness to a group of people or some people, and that you can contribute to other people's lives. And when all 3 of these needs are satisfied, when you feel autonomous, competent, and related to others or connected, then you're more likely to have a higher intrinsic motivation, be interested and curious about life or the activities you're engaged in, be more engaged in those activities, and have more positive emotions about it. And when in class, it means that within that context of the classroom, those needs will need to be satisfied. So how can we satisfy, sorry, I think my Wi-Fi is not happy. I hope you can still see my image. Okay. So what can satisfy those 3 needs so you can have the more internal type of motivation that can be sustained? What can we find there? Well, I asked that question in the context of school. So how can school support the 3 needs and at the same time students' motivation? To put that into perspective, we can do a little exercise, and we're going to read 2 different scenarios showing 2 different classrooms. And for each, I'll ask you to think about how would you feel if you were a student in this classroom, and again to answer in the chat so we can compare both classrooms. Okay, so this is the first scenario. The class, oh, sorry, I'm going to move this. So the class starts and your teacher describes what needs to be covered today. They show a step-by-step plan of the lesson and what you need to do and when. They start the lesson and make sure everyone is listening. And when a student is off task or students are off task, they say, you should really be paying attention now. During class, someone raises their hand and complains that the new material is difficult to understand. The teacher says, it's not that bad. I mean, you just need to be more attentive. And then they go over the last slides again. Near the end of class, your teacher asks everyone to do the book exercises in class. And when a student says that they don't know how to find the right answer, your teacher just gives them the solution right away. Now, I'd be curious to see, how would you feel in that classroom? Anything in the chat, you can write in. Anything you think about, you can write in the chat. How does the teacher make you feel? And if there are any specific thing in the scenario that you notice.
I'm just, while we wait for answers, guys, I'm just going to turn off mine and Vanessa's webcams just to help out with the bandwidth, etc. So if we pop off, please don't worry. And we've had a few answers come through, Vanessa. So I'll go through them one by one.
Thanks.
So we've had one person who says in that scenario, they thought that they would not be learning very much at all. Thank you, Jasleen. And Eleanor points out that she wouldn't feel very motivated at all, as after all there is no healthy challenge whatsoever. And Chloe, just to confirm, the message which you wrote is indeed the chat box.
Okay.
So I think we've got a few responses there where they're saying they're not feeling very motivated. Oh, and we've had one more come through, and thank you, Jasleen, for building upon your idea. But they say that they feel like, well, the teacher doesn't particularly care too much if they understand the task properly or not.
Good observation, people. I like it. So I guess most people are not feeling this class. I really like that you pointed out elements of caring relationships, of understanding the material. I think we're ready to move on to the second classroom and see what you think of that one. Thanks, everyone. Okay, so you go to your second class. This time, the class starts and your teacher describes what you will be doing today and asks for your input before finalizing the lesson plan. So they start the lesson by explaining why today's lesson is important and how it can align with your personal goals. During class, someone raises their hand and complains that the new material is difficult to understand. Your teacher acknowledges that the material can be confusing since it is complex. Your teacher offers a choice to the group. They can go over the last slide a second time as a group, or everybody can take 10 minutes to work out the difficult parts in smaller groups. Near the end, your teacher asks everyone to do the book exercises, either in class or at home. You stay in class. When a student says that they don't know how to find the right answer, your teacher says, "Oh, this can be frustrating, I know. I'm sure that you can figure it out. Do you want a hint? Do you want to try again on your own, or you want to try again with someone else, like another student?" How would you feel in that classroom? And how would you feel with that teacher? Again, you can enter your answers in the chat. If you want, you can also compare it to the first classroom, if that makes it easier to point out elements.
So we've had Vanessa so come through. I'll start off with yourself, Eleanor, that this person feels much more supported because it seems like the teacher actually wants them to do well. Chloe, Chloe says that they would feel much more comfortable in this classroom in comparison to the other because the teacher actually seems that they want to help more. Jasleen points out that the teacher cares more and is giving them more opportunity to learn on their own and progress. And I like this as well. Very nice. I think Eleanor, I think I've got a spot on. The teacher is empathetic in terms of the material and is actually sympathizing with the students as opposed to just trying to get them to set a task and get them to understand it.
Wow, I really like all the answers. That's really good. Yeah, the audience is already pointing out the elements that we are going to see a bit later on about what researchers have also recognized and acknowledged and identified within teachers' practices. And it is true that the caring part, or what a lot of people have brought up, that the teacher seems more caring or kind of takes a bit more, there could be respect, or it takes a bit more of the student's perspective to help them either do things their own way or just support their perspective in general, can be very helpful to feel better in the classroom and make student want to participate and be motivated and do their work. Were there any other answers, or we're good?
That is it for now.
Thank you. Yeah. So I guess you would have a preference for class 2. So this is what I'm studying in primary schools mainly, but how I'm interested in how teachers and how can their practices support the motivation of students and the 3 basic psychological needs. As we've seen in the exercise, the teacher plays a very big role and a specific role, and they have a big impact on how students feel in the classroom and act in the classroom. They kind of set the tone and even the goals that students will pursue. They set the tone also in the ways in which relationships will be established between teacher and students, and as well between students themselves. So research shows that when students perceive their teachers or their professors as using more what they call supportive practices, which is autonomy, support, structure, and involvement, we'll go a bit deeper into these later, students feel more motivated, they feel better, they feel more engaged in class, more positive emotions. However, when teachers use more frustrating practices, which is being controlling, when the classroom feels a bit chaotic, so the chaos, or when the relationships feel rejecting, then of course students report either no motivation or motivation only by external rewards or guilt, pride, those more external motivation that we saw in the beginning. And they also report being less engaged in their class, more absenteeism, less homework handed, less participation, and of course, more negative emotion about their studies. We're going to go through these practices. And while we go through these practices, you can maybe think about your own teachers, the teachers you've really liked, the teachers you've disliked, and see if they were doing some of those supportive or frustrating practices while we go through them. So the first set of practice, autonomy support versus control. Teachers who provide autonomy support will give choices. They will see students as people who can choose to follow their own interests. Either it could be the choice of a project and an essay, choosing the topic, or it could be a choice in the way how you want to do this exercise. I will show you one way to do it, but maybe you can think of another way to do it. They explain why what they do is important to students, what they have to learn has a usefulness for their lives. They support interest and motivation that the student has already, and they will try to lift that up and use that to make students motivated for other things that they might be less motivated in or interested in. They will use empathy. So one of the things that was noted in the exercise, so they will acknowledge students' perspective, they will ask for their opinion. They will also, importantly, acknowledge difficult emotions in the classroom, because there will be worry, there will be confusion, some things are difficult, and it's normal to feel emotions at school. So they will kind of have space or provide a safe space for that. They will also use a description. So they will describe problems when there's a problem instead of being judgmental. So they could say, oh, this part of the problem, there was a step that's missing, instead of being you are wrong or you're just bad at maths, for example. On the opposite side, there's control. Controlling practices, or teachers who use controlling practices will use pressure or shaming to motivate students. So they will use pressure for students to be a certain way, and there's kind of one way or nothing else is good. They could use shaming by comparing students to one another, the best students or the worst students, or why don't you do better like this other student. They use incentive to motivate, rewards or punishment, and they they don't support the interests or internal motivation that students already have. In those classrooms, often difficult emotions are unacceptable. You cannot express them. You cannot disagree with a teacher or be uninterested in something or feel worry or sadness, and that emotion won't necessarily have a space in that classroom. And there are more judgments, like I was explaining first to describe the problem. But the second set of practices, structure versus chaos. So teachers who use more structure will provide clear and predictable guidelines and expectations. You know what to do in that classroom. You know how to attain, if your goal is to learn this thing or get this grade, then you know what to do to achieve it. The rules for behavior, the behavior you should show in that classroom is clear. The consequences of not following the rules are predictable. You know what's going to happen. Your teacher is not flip-flopping every lesson. The teacher provides right challenges. That means they're not too difficult or too easy. You kind of have to have that middle ground to keep you interested and learning. And again, they provide informative feedback on when they give a test and they have to give back feedback. It is clear what you can do to improve. Now for chaos, you can kind of imagine it unclear, unpredictable in terms of rules and expectation. Challenges can be too hard or too easy, so you don't want to try, or it's not worth trying. And you feel that the feedback that you receive from the teacher are judgmental or make you feel like you can't really either improve or you would have to change your whole self to be accepted. And the last one is the set of practices about more of the relationship. So involvement versus rejection. So teachers who show involvement will establish warm relationship with the students. They will try to resolve conflict when they happen, and they will show more care and support. Care, which was another one that came up in the exercise. While teachers who will exhibit more rejection, will be cold, in a cold demeanor, cold in relationships. If conflicts arise, they won't really take care of them, and they won't show an interest to bond and get to know their students. So all of these practices are studied in the school context. I study them with primary school teachers and students, but they're the same practices that can be found useful in any type of relationship to show support to another human and sustain and support their motivation and well-being. So these exact practices have been studied between teacher-students, like I was saying, parent-child, employer-employee, coach and athlete, but also in equal relationships, like between siblings, friends, and intimate partners. So they're practices that you can try to do more in your own relationships with others. But how can you support your own needs and motivation? So there's two ways. Either you can change your own environment, if you can change teachers to get a more supportive teacher. Change parents is a bit more difficult. Get some friends to support your need, or you can try to support your own needs and motivation when you can. So if you have very little motivation to do something, can you ask yourself, which of my need is not satisfied right now, and which one, if I worked on, could help me be a bit more motivated? So for example, for autonomy, if you think back on what autonomy means, can you identify the reasons why what you're doing is important for that specific activity or thing you need to study? Can you relate that to your goals or to your values? Can you make any connection with things that interest you if you have to choose a topic for an essay or a project or anything that you find fun? Another way to think about it is, can you ask your teacher or your professor for things that could be improved or could help your experience in class? Along those lines, could they help you find a reason to study this or understand the importance of that topic? And you can also use more empathy with yourself, a bit kind of more self-compassion. Can you acknowledge your own feeling when you feel worried or sad about something? Can you acknowledge your own feeling and support yourself? Now for competence. A way to help your feeling of competence is to break down your work in smaller steps and goals and things. any goal that seems more achievable is going to make it easier to go from one step to the other and really help feel more in control. So if you have a hard time doing it yourself, you can ask, of course, other people, teachers or tutors, for either more explanation when you don't understand something, or ask concrete feedback on your work, how you can really improve. When you can pick your own topic for a project and an essay, pick something that gives you a little bit of a challenge. Of course, not too big, not too small, but enough to be interesting and having a little bit of a puzzle to solve. Finally, for relatedness, anything that you can do in terms of relations. Can you talk about what you're learning with people you're close with? Or can you do homework, of course, study with others? Or can you give back and help other people understand the lessons? This way you feel useful and connected with people. Can you do anything to belong to a group or feel more attached to a school? If you're going, for example, to university soon, then can you get into clubs or sports or activities that interest you, so you can feel more connected with other people of the same community? And of course, care for your relationship and solve conflicts. I know it's hard, it can be hard, but solve conflicts when they happen. So satisfying your need will help you get closer to the intrinsic motivation, or the highest part of the extrinsic motivation, things that are more internal, your values, your goals, your identity. But it's important as well to understand that you can use the other types of motivation, the more external one, the reward, the deadlines, things that would make you proud. When nothing else is motivating, they could be very motivating. If there's a form you need to fill that you've been pushing off because you had to have zero motivation for it, yeah, you can use rewards and try to bribe yourself into doing it. That's fine. You can mix it up with understanding the importance of the task you have to do, and a little bit of reward as well. I think knowing the different types of motivation you can have makes it easier for you to use all those different types of motivation to do activities or anything that you want to engage in. So how do I use everything that I've talked about today? I use it in my everyday life, but I use it in research. Like I was saying, in primary school, teachers and students, as well with parents and children. Both of them, those situations, can use the practices to support and avoid the practices that frustrate the needs. I also test interventions to change the practices that teachers use. I want more teachers to show empathy. I want more teachers to use autonomy, support, and structure and involvement with the students, so the students can feel better in class and more motivated and engaged. I'm also trained as a clinical psychologist in Canada, not in the UK. So I work with children, adolescents, and their families, and I really see my work in research as complementary to the clinical work, because there's also a certain motivation to support with clients who come to see you in clinical psychology. They have a goal to change, or some mental health goals that they want to reach and make changes in their life. So how can I sustain their motivation to reach those goals and try even when it gets difficult? And how can I support them through need supportive relationships, where I can be, as a clinician, supportive of their basic psychological needs? And that's it. Thank you very much for being there and listening. If you have any questions, you can reach me on my email, and just right underneath is the project website, which I'm doing this year, if you're interested in knowing more about what I do in general.